Hey guys, welcome to Fleetwood Patch. My name is Jeremy. If this is your first time on our channel, thank you so much for stopping by. We greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. That always helps us out. You can reach us at fleetwoodpatch@gmail.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Real quick before we get going, I always like to try to give a couple shout outs to a couple channels that have been really kind to our channel, and we like to reciprocate that and kind of plug them as well. First one is Whyde Family Farm. Really great channel. I highly suggest you check them out. Very good content. And the other one is my good friend at Come On Homesteading. That guy has got some really awesome content. He's just a good, wholesome, good old-fashioned guy. Lot of fun. Comes in and comments all the time on my videos, so I appreciate him very much. Check him out. Come on, Homesteading. Now, we talk a lot in this day and age about how difficult it is sometimes to grow a garden and all the challenges involved with it. And it kind of makes you wonder, how did our ancestors do this? I mean, you're talking about people that didn't have access to running water and to peat moss and to all these amendments. How in the world did they do this? Well, one thing you got to keep in mind is these guys did it for a whole different reason. They did it for survival. We do it for recreation. Yeah, it's great to have that food, but they did it so they could literally eat. So the planning in that garden probably was a lot more intense. They had to make it work. Second thing, guys, this is going to sound weird, but the soil was way different back then. You're talking about soil that had been practically untouched for hundreds and hundreds of years. Why does that make a difference? You got a lot of good amendments underneath that soil naturally. Now, how do we know all this? Well, I went online a while back and streamed on Netflix a documentary called Kiss the Ground. Many of you have probably seen it. If you have not, check it out. It is a must. But basically what it talks about is basically what I was just saying. You know, years ago, you had ground that was untouched. You had ground that was rich in composting material, that was loose. And what happened when we started having this huge migration out to the west and started getting all these farmers out there? There was a big mass of farmers tilling the soil, raking up all that good stuff that was in it and the nitrogen. What happened to that soil? Well, it dried out. Go back in time and look up the Dust Bowl and kind of see what happens when you rake up all that good stuff. It was the very first real man-made disaster, I feel, when all that good, rich material was out of the soil. What happened? You had a lot of dust. You had a lot of damaging winds. You had dry, dead soil just wreaking havoc throughout huge parts of the Midwest and in the Southwest as well. So what do a lot of people do in today's world? Well, they kind of till their garden. They get that fertilizer in there. They do everything they can to try to make that soil super rich. Well, back then you really didn't have to. That soil was already rich. You were talking about years and years of leaves falling, of just things breaking down in that soil to make it more rich and soft and basically untouched. When you're working with soil like that, and a lot of people that are doing Back to Eden gardening can attest to this, you really don't have to do much to get a good crop. So think about it. You got all this soil right now that's sitting out there, but it looks completely just void of life. Okay, it's just dirt just sitting out there. So what's the difference between what you have, what they had back then? Well, back then They weren't raking up leaves. They weren't making sure that land was clear and everything looked pretty. It was breaking down naturally, and what was happening was everything that was in those leaves, that was in those twigs, everything that kind of died on top of that soil broke down, and worms got to it and microbes got to it, and it loosened up that soil and it made it rich. On top of that, you also had the cover crop that was already there. Cover crop is a great amendment to your soil for two reasons. Especially if you have chickens, it's great to have them go in the wintertime, pick that thing clean, let them drop their manure, till that soil up, just that top layer, and you're going to have some very soft, rich soil. And the second reason is it kind of soaks up water like a sponge. It really kind of holds water in a little bit better, as opposed to just dead soil sitting there where the water is just going to drain right through. It's really going to hold that moisture in there and really help those plants along the way as far as getting that water that they need. So if this is your first year starting a garden, by all means, go ahead and get the potting mix, get the soil, get the compost, get whatever you need, and go ahead and feed those plants for that year. I wouldn't do anything with it that very first year. At the end of the season, however, go ahead and start adding that compost on top. You know, get the leaves, get all that green matter, get all that brown matter. Do a compost bin. Compost bins are becoming more and more popular. Do your research on composting. But put that down at the end of the season. Put that stuff down. Give it a chance to break down. Don't till it. Don't till it. Because you got a lot of nitrogen, you got a lot of good stuff that's in that soil. And once you start tilling it, all that stuff gets released up into the atmosphere. We don't want that in the atmosphere, okay? We want it in our garden. That's what's going to feed our plants. That's what's going to feed us and have us with a really successful garden for that year. Now, I know that Back to Eden garden isn't for everybody. There are skeptics out there saying whether or not it'll work. If you have more than one garden bed, do a test run. Give it a try. Give it an honest 2 or 3 years. Just putting stuff on there, letting it break down during the season, or just constantly applying that compost and not tilling or touching that soil, except the very top part when you're putting the seeds in. Give it a try. I think you might be relatively surprised. Don't be afraid to put down that cover crop. Don't be afraid to have clover going throughout your garden. A lot of people worry sometimes, well, it's going to choke out my plants. It's going to suck up all the water. Cover crop is not going to go that deep, guys, and it's going to soak up water in a good way and loosen up that soil, so whatever else you have in there is going to have a better chance to get to that water and retain it. Plus, it's going to soak up nitrogen and put it back in the soil where it belongs. Another thing to do, add wood chips, add sawdust, things of that nature. Put it on top. Guys, mulching is a huge deal in gardening. I cannot stress that enough. Why? Well, for 2 reasons. Number one, it's going to keep the moisture locked in that soil. Okay, that soil is going to be less apt to evaporate all that water. And second thing, it's going to break down. And as it starts to break down, what is that basically? It's compost. It's stuff to feed your plant. It's dead material that's going to feed the new material. Wood chips, big deal. Look into it. And not the stuff at the hardware store that's painted or anything like that. I'm talking real wood chips. Go out, see if your city provides any type of free mulching program. Look up Chip Drop, where they actually will cut down trees, mulch everything. They got to find a place to put it. Put down your address. I would love to have tons of wood chips for my yard, for my garden, and make it lush. So what am I trying to say here? Guys, look into Back Eden gardening. I think it is probably, in the long run, your easiest bet for having a rich, lush garden, and you're not going to have to work at it as hard because the ground's really going to take care of it itself. So put that compost down, start doing those cover crops. Let everything break down on top of that soil. Don't touch that soil except for the very, very top part of it whenever you're planting seeds in the spring and summertime. But let it go. Let it thrive. Make a good ecosystem for whatever you're growing. You know, God was quite the architect and really knew what he was doing when he created plant life and the seasons. You know, you have rich, lush leaves in the summertime, and then when the winter, fall hits, all those leaves fall down. Have you ever noticed that those leaves tend to not blow all over the place? Sure, you're going to get a couple leaves here and there that are blowing in the wind, but they tend to stay in that spot. They tend to want to be there, and what happens? They naturally break down. Do you see that same pile of leaves in the springtime? Usually not. It's usually broken down by that point. And what do you have after that? You got some good leaf compost on top of that soil, and it's building and building and building each year, making that soil more lush, more loose, and able to retain that moisture and ready for whatever you want to plant in it. So the big question is, are we making gardening harder than it needs to be? I think sometimes we are. I think we look at garden beds and we look at it as almost like in our house, we got to have a clean area. We got to have it nice and orderly and clean and just have the dirt in there. Not true. Now, are there things that we can do in this day and age to make it a little easier compared to back then? Absolutely. Like I said, we have rain to running water, which is a big plus. If you can, look into rain barrels. Why would you want to do rainwater as opposed to just regular tap water? Well, what's in our tap water? We got chlorine in the tap water. Do you really think the plants want chlorine? No. They just want regular, clean, fresh water. So maybe that was another advantage to them doing what they did the way they did back then. It was a little more pure. Now again, I'm not saying go out and spend hundreds of dollars on things like rain barrels and all this compost and everything. Start off small. Again, if you have more than one garden bed, do a test run on one of them. Do a cover crop. See how it goes. Look up in your area and see what cover crops do best. And give it a try. The worst that can happen is you wasted a year on part of your garden. But I really don't think that's going to be the case, guys. I think you're going to see dramatic results in a way that you're not working as hard to produce. Go ahead and take those kitchen scraps that you have and start putting them in a compost bin. You know, shred some paper up. Put that in with it. Give it a spot to break down. Give it time to break down and see what you come up with. And just put it on that very top layer of soil. Just set it up there. Let it work its way into the dirt. See what you come up with. I think when we're gardening, it's always an experiment. We're always experimenting with how we can grow, how we can better ourselves. What better way than to look at what they did in the past and how they made it work and how they made life flourish. That's it for today, guys. Thanks for joining us. Again, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Until next time, this is Jeremy with Fleetwood Patch saying, you got this. God bless you guys.